All right, I think I have this right. This has been frustrating because I've filmed this video a couple of times already and the microphone keeps messing up. So, yeah, hopefully this works. And I am in isolation with my family and I'm going insane. And I would imagine that's happening to a lot of us out there. I love these people, but it's just too much for me. That's what it is. And they keep telling me to keep scaling back my activity, and I am losing my mind. So imagine there's like 30% of the population has some kind of mental illness. That can be anything as minor as like ADHD, stuff like that. This is rough, so check in on people. So get to the discussion section, that kind of stuff. So we have been given the directive to give you guys new content every time you have class. So for me, I ended up, since we started on a Wednesday technically with this online stuff, I'm just going to update every B day, what would have been B day, and we're only allowed to have about 40 minutes of content max. They don't want us to put more stress on you guys, as if we need more stress right now. So I am going to go over material. I'm going to keep the assignments short and sweet, and I just hope you guys are doing okay. From this slide, so throughout this PowerPoint, what I want you to do is actually just answer different questions, and I'll flag it in the assignment section. So question 1 will come from this slide, and I want you to answer that first bullet point. Just look it up. Look it up. When in doubt, Google it out. So I'm just going to kind of introduce the subject with this. We'll come back to criminal profiling a little bit later. This may be a 2 or 3 parter because it's wrapping up all of Strand 8. So, okay, from this one, this will be the part where you guys are like, why though? Sorry. I know this looks like a lot of words, but shouldn't take you longer than 10 minutes to get these defined real quick. So you're going to actually define these for number 2 on your assignment. So when we're talking about these different things, you can go, oh yeah, I remember I defined that. So we're going to start with the nervous system. So in standard 1 of Strand 8, that's how they organize our material. This would be the nervous system. So the reason we dissected brains was so you could get to know the actual anatomy of the brain a little bit better. But what we're looking at on this slide is the cerebrum. So I keep trying to point at it as if you can see me pointing. Teaching is so hard like this, but the cerebrum is down there where it says cerebrum on that picture. It's so my nature to be like, see, and be all explosive with my movements. And now I feel like I'm like, meep. So good fun times. But in the cerebrum, we get all of those bullet points that are listed there on the slide for you. We have some different lobes that we'll talk about in a minute. But if you look at the surface of the brain, we see wrinkles, we see ridges. The wrinkles are the sulci, and the ridges are the gyri. So I always think, like, if you sulk, you get wrinkles. So somehow we've got to laugh through this weird time. Okay, also part of the brain is the cerebellum. So it's that little pink part in the picture. And the little pink part in the picture is the cerebellum. It's going to give you motor control. Kind of think about every time you take a step, you're using over 200 muscles, and you have to use them in coordination where you're kind of moving your center of gravity forward. And this is a lot of where your coordination comes from, is the cerebellum. And if we cut mid-sagittally, like here, which we could have talked about with this one. This is an actual, like, it kind of looks more like a little sheep brain, but we cut it mid-sagittally, like this. And when you do that in the cerebellum, you can see what's called the arbor vitae, and that's essentially myelinated tissue in the brain. So if we cut the brain mid-sagittally, we'll be able to see both hemispheres. We'll be able to see the corpus callosum, the thalamus, and kind of all the midbrain structures. A lot of the midbrain structures were things that we talked about in terms of serial killers. We also talked about the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So we'll get into it. Okay, So this is showing us the cerebrum again. So remember, the cerebrum is the big brain with all the higher order thinking, which includes 4 lobes. So for number 3, I actually want you to list out the 4 lobes and just a real quick blurb just reminding us, well, what does this one do? What does that one do? What does this one do? So I'm not going to tell you. I want you to look it up. And you probably should know this from memory, but just as kind of a fun fact, you can live without parts of your brain. There was the story of Phineas Gage in the frontal lobe. So remember, he was using a tamping iron with dynamite. It's just a great combination. And the tamping iron went through his face. And they say like they saw brain matter like shooting out. That's not funny, is it? But he lived, and they say he was a little bit like goofy after. And you can imagine the frontal lobe. Here's one. The frontal lobe helps with a lot of your decision making processes and your personality. So just kind of think of how that possibly could have affected Mr. Gage. All right, so this is a brainstem. It's a really complicated picture of the brainstem. I don't know why I picked this one necessarily, although it looks super important. This is going to be where we basically have like our reptilian brain all still together. So things like your blood pressure and your heart rate and those kinds of things are regulated in your brainstem. So fun fact, Vikes, if you get a spinal cord injury, the closer it is to the brainstem, and this should be obvious because the higher up it is, the more catastrophic it is. And part of it is because you will be blocking off your vital organs, the signal going to your vital organs. So you wouldn't be able to live. So fun fact. Okay, so next we're into our periphery nervous system. So we kind of have what's called an axial nervous system and a peripheral one. So we've got to have a way that we can do jazz hands and things like that. So we have to be able to send the signal. If my brain says to my fingers, hey, it's jazz fingers time, then I had to have sent a signal that says, okay, motor nerves, go make this happen. And it did. So the way it does that is sometimes it's in reaction to something. So if we maybe touch something that's freezing cold, maybe we went to touch a railing or something and it was super cold, that signal would go back. The touch receptors would pick that up. That signal would go to the brain. Your brain would go, that's cold, pull away. And so you would have basically afferent nerves sending you the sensory signal that says it's cold, and then you kind of interpret it up in your brain, usually eventually in the parietal lobe, and then you get a signal that says quit touching it, pull your hand away. So those signals go through the spinal cord up to the brain and through some periphery nerves. So for example, if we were to say, how do I get to jazzy hands, our brachial plexus, which comes from C5 to T1, is going to be what's going to control what's happening in our upper extremity, essentially. So there'll be different nerve complexes. So C1 through C4, then we get just different nerve complexes. You guys don't need to concern yourself with that. But remember with the vertebra, when we were talking about the vertebra, there's C1 through C7. So C1 is the atlas holding up the whole head, and C2 is the axis. All the rest of them are just named C3, C4, C5, and you'll see that the nerves will come out that around those vertebrae, or basically above the vertebrae. So we have 31 pairs of spinal nerves, allowing us to do all the things. I'm wiggling my toes. You can't see that, but you can wiggle your toes and wiggle your fingers because you have nerve signals sending it there that are telling your muscles and your bones what to do. So this is the point in class where we were talking about the evil carpenter, and we were talking about him drilling into someone's head. So if we were to do that, the first layer that you would get to is skin, and you'd probably have a good bleeder there, because if you hit the head you'll hit some superficial blood vessels. There's not much space for that to go, so you'll get a good bleeder there. You go underneath the skin, you're to skull bone. So if you're here, skull bones, it's a frontal bone, or here, parietal, but you're to bone. And then once you get past the bone, this is giving you this little picture. It's so hard for me not to talk with my hands. But this picture is giving you like the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. There are little spaces in between. So just know that the meninges, that's what these are. Meninges are protective layers of the brain. They're essentially like membranes that are protecting the brain. They go in order. So if we're drilling into the brain, we'll hit dura mater first, then arachnoid mater, then pia mater. So DAP. But it goes, dura mater actually has a space above it. So the space above it is called epidural space. Epi means upon, and it's upon the dura, so epidural space. And then we have a space below it called the subdural space. So sub means below, think submarine. Sub goes below the water. This goes below the dura mater, so subdural space. And then you get the arachnoid mater, and then you'll have a subarachnoid space, which is important for what we're going to go into in a second. And then the pia mater is continuous with the brain. It's really hard to differentiate, but it's the last meninge. So we're going to cover 3 types of hemorrhages. So this is a brain bleed in these different spaces that I was just talking about. So just prepare yourself, because a couple of these are yucky. So I'm going to start with one that's like pretty benign. So say you get like blunt force trauma to the head, and you get a fracture in the skull, and it doesn't like penetrate through the dura mater, but it's above the dura mater. That would be an epidural hematoma. So that's a brain bleed. And in this case, maybe they lucked out because they broke their skull and they can just go ahead and drain the blood, because that's the only way to get rid of it, is to drain it. Yikes. We're not even going to touch that one, but I imagine that would be like a very extreme case. Just so you know, an epidural hematoma is typically an arterial bleed, so that's going to be the most amount of blood that leaks out. Any amount of trauma that is sustained by the head, if it compresses enough brain tissue, you're a goner. So I'm thinking that bottom right one. Sorry, that was just ridiculous. But there, you've seen it, PG-13. The one that we're looking at with the X-ray view is a transverse cut. So we're looking top down on this one, and you can see it's compressing. But they've got other problems on that one as well, and maybe it's the same like guy's brain or something. I'm not exactly sure, but. Yeah, just if you Google epidural hematoma, that one comes up. Pretty gross. Okay, then we have a subdural hematoma, and this is just giving you like, where is the brain bleed? So we've got the dura mater is intact, and the bleed is underneath the dura mater in this case. So the best picture, I guess, to show this is that cadaver section of the brain. It's a frontal section. So you can see the dura mater's intact, and where that black kind of clotted tissue, it's actually dried up blood, is underneath the dura mater. So that's the subdural bleed. A lot of times this is kind of a sad thing to note, but it's notable. A subdural hematoma is typically what shaken baby syndrome, what they are diagnosed posthumously with. Okay, then you have a subarachnoid hemorrhage, and as you can imagine, sub is under or below. This is the arachnoid layer. So it would be trauma to the head, but it would be a different place where it is bleeding. So it's showing you that in the pictures. All dangerous, these different brain bleeds. Okay, standard 2 in Strand 8 is basically all about linking the crime scene to the criminal and finding the correct the perpetrator. So this is where we're just going to Scooby-Doo it, we're going to clue game it, and we're going to figure it out, because that's what we do, we're detectives. But before we actually go into that, we need a little bit of background information. So some standard 2 background. First, we have behavior. So I have a quote here, and I'm gonna try to do this. Dr. Phil is the one that says, "The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior." So a lot of times what they'll do is look at behavior of criminals that they already done got and see if their past behavior maybe looks like something that's happening right now. So that's one way that they can kind of look at criminals. There will be some signature behaviors that exist, and I actually wrote some out just so, excuse me if you see me like looking down. Okay, in class for signature behaviors, one differentiation we made between signature behaviors was like sometimes we have an organized crime scene and sometimes we have a disorganized crime scene. And they actually go so far as to say like an organized criminal will have these types of characteristics to their personality and a disorganized person will have these different characteristics. And yet they don't really know, do they? Because we did an example of this in class, and remember you all had such weird different cases, and it ended up that it was all the same murderer. It was H.H. Holmes, the one with the motel with all the secret rooms and just crazy. So the organized killer that we talked about in class, Ted Bundy was one of those. So he actually would groom the person. He would kind of figure out who his victims were, and he would plan out the crime, and then he would hide the body. And so there was just thought put into what he was doing. So they would classify his types of murder scenes as organized, versus Jack the Ripper in London was kind of a blitz style murderer, and he would just be like, it seemed like he went after prostitutes mainly, and so he would blitz them and just mutilate them. And so it was a very disorganized crime scene when they came to it. Do the Jack the Ripper tour in London if you ever go. It's pretty cool. Okay, signature aspects versus the MO or the modus operandi. I have an example of this on this website that I'm taking you to. This is where they go into signature behaviors versus signature aspects. I would like you to come back to this and read it, but we're going to go ahead and go through Jack the Ripper's modus operandi. So he attacked white female prostitutes in their 40s in a cluster of victims and within a short distance of each other. The first 4 victims, blah, 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 found in Whitechapel area. Then he changed his MO by killing and leaving the 5th victim inside. Oh, so modus operandi, they change sometimes with experience. So if they kind of feel like people are onto them, he's going to be like, well, they're expecting them to be outside, so what if we're inside now? And then the signature piece, this one's going to be more of an emotional and psychological piece. And kind of interesting about this, so I had some examples. One was Dennis Rader. If you remember, they kind of classified him as the bind, torture, kill, and sometimes even called him the BTK killer, because that was his signature piece. Jack the Ripper's signature, it relates to what he did over and above what was necessary to commit the crime. In this case, like if you said which one's an MO and which one's a signature, like I might mix them up, because the signature aspects, I'm going to get out of this site, you can come back to it. The signature aspects have to do with the emotional and psychological themes of their killing, versus this one can change as they learn who's chasing them, kind of. So we could say in this one we classify Dennis Rader's style of killing, bind, torture, kill. Jack the Ripper, hacking and mutilating his victims. Those are signature aspects. In the MO, the staging of the body can change. So in the case of Jack the Ripper, that last victim was inside instead of outside. But sometimes they'll stage their victims in a way that maybe police officers didn't expect. Okay, so we have 2 slides left, and that's all for today. But just so you guys have kind of seen it, I think I've gone over all of the different things I wanted you to do, because now we're to 6, 7, 8. If not, it will be in the assignment section, and I'll explain it in the assignments. But we have a 6-step FBI crime scene analysis process that has to happen for us to actually apprehend the perp. So that's what this next little bit is about. But any CSI you've seen, any Bones you've seen, maybe even any Scooby-Doo, because I like to keep it light. They basically go, oh, look, here we have a crime scene. And they're essentially trying to pick up all the data from the crime scene and compare it against some files that they have that compare it to other crime scenes to say, like, is this, does this fit the signature of anyone out there? Does it fit the MO of anyone out there? Sometimes it's a brand new criminal, so they maybe don't have that person in their database. So then we just have to be detectives and find them out. Okay, so from this slide, I've given you a bunch of definitions. I've given you these same exact ones before. These are the profiling basics. So number 6, I want you to think of a crime show you've watched. Write 3 pieces of input that came from the crime scene. So input, the definition is here, collecting crime scene information. So input from a case could be a bloody shoe. It could be a handprint on the wall. It could be dust disturbed in an area that the crime scene was, or something like that, or tire tracks, things like that are input. So think of maybe the clues that they found in Scooby-Doo, maybe like, it was the old man in the end of the lane or whatever that done did it. Okay, number 7, I want you to continue with that same train of thought. So whatever the clues were from number 6, I want you to just talk about how did the show link the criminal to those little inputs that you found, to the shoe or to the whatever crime scene information there was. So it can be any episode. So if you could just be like Scooby-Doo episode 43, it's the one where they find the old man on the end of the lane. So and just kind of say like how they linked the evidence. And then 8, I would also like you to watch the British lady on the YouTube video from this slide. It's about 5 or 6 minutes, I think. I'm trying to keep you under 40, way under 40, because, under 40, because life is a nutty world right now. I don't even get it anymore. I don't get what's right and what's wrong. Like, I feel like I'm going crazy inside, but I can't go outside. Pray for me. Okay. We're going to get into the testing bits next time and talk about different individual criminals and things like that. By the end of this, maybe 2 or 3 videos later, we'll be done. You guys, if you need help, please contact me. Please, please, please. I want to help. Our district has food available to anyone that is not eating. All the students in the district, they basically approved funding to feed you guys. So if there's something that's not going okay, let me know. I can get you hooked up with resources. I'll try and bring you food, anything. Stay safe, stay sane, because again, 30% of us out here are going crazy with this isolation stuff. But know that I care about you. And if you need to connect with me, please, let's go discussion section. I'm looking at assignments, discussion, announcements on Canvas. That's mainly what I'm using, linking it over to YouTube. So thanks, guys.